What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with our final takeaways video of the 2022 NFL season for the Detroit Lions. This video, we're going to put a little bow on this season, and luckily, we're talking about a Lions win to finish off this season. We're going to touch a little bit on things upcoming for this offseason, some future stuff. However, we got a lot of time for that, and that's going to be the upcoming videos, of course. But in this video, I kind of want to put that last little touch on this game. We will probably show some all-22 from this as the week goes on a little bit. I've started to get into that, so we'll probably do a video on that just because, you know, it's the last one. It was a good win, or some things that I want to show that I thought were cool, and then we'll start getting into this offseason. So with that being said, let's get it started.
Fired up. It's made a great decision.
Great teammates, coaches, and other people who want to be Super Bowl champions. And we are. We're going to do it this year.
And we're going places because we want to go places.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome, everybody, to my video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, man, it is the end of the Lions 2022 season. Ooh, man, we were so close to getting into the playoffs. Shout out to everybody that watched the pregame show live. We went through it. We were reacting to that Seattle game, and oh, it was tough. It was tough to see that end. I think Brad Holmes really said it well, man. He felt like, you know, we could have basically hung with those teams if we got in there. I was super confident. I felt like if we got in there, we could win the NFC. Now, that's going to sound crazy. Some people may not have heard that, and they may think I'm crazy saying that, but I do feel like we could have done that if we would have just gotten in. I was hoping this team would get the opportunity, because they felt like a playoff team to me. They just did. They were peaking at the right time, and I want to start with that. One thing that we know last year, we won 3 games last season, but one thing that we pointed to was a strong finish by the Lions, okay? They finished the season strong. The offense started to get going a little bit. They improved in a lot of different areas. They seemed to settle in. They got Taylor Decker back. They finished off the season with a win versus Green Bay, even though at halftime they took their starters out, but they left some in there, but they took, you know, Rodgers and those guys out, but we finished with a win. We beat the Arizona Cardinals, and even in some of our losses, you felt like, man, the Lions were right there. And then they started to kind of turn a corner towards the end of the season. And that led us into this year where, unfortunately, we got off to the slow start, 1-6. We had some tough injuries to begin this season. I think specifically in the back end. I've talked about this many times. I think at the cornerback position, it hurt us with the injuries that we had. We knew coming in we weren't going to have Jacobs. Unfortunately, Amani struggled this season. I thought that was one of our biggest problems, was the back end to begin this season. And at the beginning of the season, they had Mike Hughes playing at the slot, which meant you didn't have him on the outside. Later in the season, it switched. Will Harris went into the slot, which was good for us. And then, of course, on the D-line, not having the James Houstons up and what he turned into, Pascal, Romeo Okwara, of course. Unfortunately, defensively, we were really just basically awful in the first 7 games through that 1-6 start for the Lions. Offensively, we weren't perfect. You know, we had some turnovers in there for sure, but we were scoring really well. The run game was off to a ridiculous start, and it was like, man, if this thing carries on, it's going to be historic. They were outstanding. In the first 7 games, the Lions averaged 5 yards per carry. They were fantastic, but they were 1-6, and they were close, and it felt like the year before. Oh, we're close, but we gotta somehow find a way to win the game at the end. We had to find a way, and the Lions began to do that, right? They had a lot of things go down at that time, trading away T.J. Hockenson, firing Aubrey Pleasant, and then at the same time, you also got some reinforcements back, like Jerry Jacobs, who popped right back into the lineup, and then eventually he became a starter for us. Mike Hughes got some looks on the outside, and all of a sudden, you got a couple of players back at that time, and the Lions started to finish some of those games. And that's the first thing, and I won't go too far into this because we're probably going to talk about it at some point. But the first thing that hits me is the Lions' strong finish once again. I was thinking about this. I think arguably, I could argue that this is the best win I've ever seen. As a Lions fan, you know, from all the games I can remember, the first season I remember real well is 2011. I remember every game 2011. I do. But before that, is a little, you know, little foggy. All right, a little foggy before that, probably because we struggled too. But I do remember pretty much all of 2011. And I think you could make the case this is the Lions' best win that I've ever seen. Now, I think you could argue maybe like a game that obviously got them into the playoffs because we didn't make the playoffs this year. So it's tough to say that to a game that didn't really have meaning towards playoffs by the time it kicked off. However, what it meant for Green Bay, and it meant for them to get in, the fact that they had won their last 4 straight, what it's meant for us, we've seen it play Green Bay all the time at the end of the season, and usually that doesn't go well when something is on the line. Usually never goes well. let alone winning at Green Bay. I mean, I remember the first time we won at Green Bay, we broke that massive streak. Amir Abdullah had the big kick return, and it was an ugly football game, right? He had the missed field goals, ugly. But we won, and I was just like shocked. Like, we just won at Green Bay. That was not supposed to happen. One thing that I've loved about this coaching staff, specifically in this matchup, and I think I hit it on Monday, is I've loved the way this coaching staff before this game has played Aaron Rodgers. I feel like defensively, they've come into really good game plans. They force him to hold on to the ball a little bit longer. Now, yeah, it helps when there's no Devontae, but even last year, I thought, and that was week 17, so we only played the first half, but I just liked the way the Lions played this team. There was no fear, but at the same time, I thought game plan-wise, they always had a good plan for this team. And that was the case once again, but this one was different because of what it meant, right? Last year's win versus the Packers at the end of the year didn't mean anything to them, right? And technically towards playoff, didn't mean anything. You won the game, but it didn't mean anything, all right? You lost the first one at home. Then this season, right, you win, it gets your streak going. But this one meant everything for the Packers. And there was just kind of that sense everybody believed, it's the Packers. They don't lose at Lambeau. They're not going to lose to the Lions. But there was no fear by the Lions whatsoever. Like, they just felt, and I felt the Lions were the better team. And sometimes the better team, you feel like, doesn't always win. And in this case, I felt coming in the Lions were the better team, and there seemed to just be no fear. It was almost like a sense of calm. Even when Dan Campbell was interviewed after the first quarter, it's like, it's going to get going, though. It's going to get going. Like, it was not a pretty beginning to this game. But we did everything, all the little things, just like we did last time we played them and won at home. We won the turnover battle, which I thought could be the most important, and you talk about this game, is turnover battle. But just because of who the Packers are, they've been winning the turnover battle, and we won that. We didn't turn it over, and we forced like 3 turnovers on them, a fumble, an interception, almost another interception, a turnover on downs. We won that. Red zone defense showed up. Aside from one, I think, touchdown that they gave on a crossing route, they showed up in the red zone again, forced some field goals. The Lions did those things, but there was like that calming sense of, we're going to be all right. We're going to be fine. And it was just different. How big it was, like, you could think of it like, okay, we slayed the king or whatever. We went 5-1 in our division. And yeah, the Vikings won the division, and that's the first goal. But at the same time, it's not the same when you play the Vikings. And it's just different with Green Bay because of what that's meant historically. Even 2014, I talk about finishing strong. 2014, we finished strong. However, you could still argue we didn't finish strong like this, right? The last 2 years, we've won our last games of the season, both against Green Bay, one at home, now on the road. And even if you go back to our best year that I've ever seen, 2014, the Lions lost the game to win the division at their house. At their house, they had a chance to win the division against the Packers, and they lost 30-20. And they went in as a wild card, and as wacky as that game was, they lost it in the wild card round. I don't want to talk about that game. But that happened, right? 2011, you're 5-0 at the beginning of the year. You finished 5-6. And you lose in the wild card round, you get matched up with the Saints. 2016, you lose your last 3 games. He had like a thumb injury. You lose your last 3 games, you get beat by Seattle. This, to me, felt like, and it would have obviously meant even more if the Lions were in a position to make the playoffs, but the biggest win I've ever seen. I think I can make that case just for what this meant. And I'm sure you guys have all seen the clips by now of, Jameson asking for the Rodgers jersey, and Rodgers like, I think I'm going to hold on to this one. I'm not going to speculate, because honestly, I don't care. Like, hey, we had talked to the Packers guys. Some of them don't want him necessarily to stick around because they feel like Love could have done what Rodgers did. And we'll get to the All-22 and things like that, right? Some of those throws, I think, just outstanding play by Kirby Joseph. But it doesn't really matter because there's just not that sense. Like, it was always kind of like, there was always that vibe of like, oh, it's Rodgers, that's the guy. But there's not that anymore. Like, I don't care. Keep him around. Get rid of him, like, have him move on. Like, it doesn't really matter as a Lions fan at this point. It's that feeling that you get, as well as the big win. It's just that new sense. It's the new vibe that you get from this. Being 3-1 against this team under this staff and winning that game, it just changes everything. Where it's like, yeah, Rodgers will come back, but there's just not that thought anymore. It's like, well, we did this. You had everything on the line. We had nothing on the line, and we did this. It's one thing to be a spoiler. It's another thing to actually spoil a team's season. And that's what they did. And it wasn't week 14 being a spoiler. It was the last week of the season. You spoiled a team that had to win to get in, and nothing else had to happen. Now, talking about the game a little bit, all right? We'll get to the All-22, so I don't want to go too far into this. But a couple things that stood out. First off, defensively. I've loved the way we played this team defensively in the past against Green Bay. And I think, again, in this game. Like, we looked at some of the creative things in our pregame show that the Packers offense does. All of the eye candy is unreal. The fast motion, the tight end post-snap. Like, all the movement that they have, the end-arounds, the jets, they hit us with all of those things. And I just felt like we were so disciplined. Like, we were moving on a string as a defense. And there was a couple times they got us with some little things where it was like, okay, that was super creative. But for the most part, Will Harris Duracell, Alex Anzalone, okay, Duracell, Deshaun Elliott, Aiden Hutchinson. I start to circle those dudes. John Kaminsky, we're like specifically the second level guys, but even the edge rushers as well, just the discipline that they played with, right? Whether it was not crashing down on a play action fake and trying to keep in front of Rodgers, whether it was, all the fast motion, everybody having to move on a string, the communication, which I thought was massive. There was a play for Jerry Jacobs, and I touched on this coming into it, where last week or against Carolina, I believe it was Carolina, you saw, a motion that they had pre-snap. It didn't seem Jerry was aware of it, and they hit us with the jet sweep, and we were unable to contain it, picked up like 13 yards. Meanwhile, this week, Jerry clearly was aware of it. He saw the motion, and he dives down. Now, he doesn't make the play, but he strings it out so far that they limit to like a 5-yard gain. And it was things like that. We didn't give up the big play on the ground. We were so disciplined in that area, which is the first thing. So much credit to the defense for that. They were so prepared for this game. And obviously having a dude like Aiden Hutchinson, which is just a game changer that maybe we didn't have last year on defense, is nice. It's nice. When he holds the ball just a little bit too long, or when he just wins immediately, it's cool to have guys like that that are just that just win. Speaking of guys that just win, the defensive line, I thought, showed up. I mean, this Packers offense, they like to do the wide zone. They have all this eye candy. They like to get to the edge. But for them, because of the discipline that we played with, our defensive line had an opportunity to make some plays. And I thought Benito Jones was outstanding. Against all the zone running that they do, I thought he was outstanding. Getting upfield. He is so explosive with that first step. I thought he showed it off. Isaiah Buggs was dominant as a front side DT when they tried to run his direction. Aleem McNeil, we know what he is. But the D-line showed up. We gave up our chunks. We gave up some runs. We missed some cutback tackles. We missed some tackles in the box. Hughes missed one. Like, that happened. We didn't give up the big play. And I thought for, again, the majority of the game, we won the defensive front, which the Packers have started to kind of lead on. And then in the back end, have Amani step in, right? Like, I watch it back, and he contested his passes. Yeah, he gave up a big one. Jerry gave up a PBU at the beginning of the game. I think, both those, they contested really well in those situations. It wasn't a blown assignment. It wasn't a blown coverage. It was you had to make a heck of a catch, heck of a throw, and hey, maybe he got away with a little OPI. The point is, though, you challenged all of those. And then again, we saw the combo coverage come back out, right? Deshaun Elliott manned up on a tight end, and they throw that little corner route. It was just a fantastic catch. You're like, dude, I can live with that, because that guy was playing well. Duracell was covering his butt off. Like, it was all of that. And then I'll give some credit to Derek Barnes. I thought Derek Barnes would be a part of this because he has been in the past, and it's all those like Tampa 2 looks where he has to drop into the deep middle zone. Look at the near interception by Kirby Joseph. Look at Derek Barnes. He's the guy running up to seam. He's the guy taking that away. And then when Rodgers looks there and then comes back to the fade, which he throws, and Kirby Joseph is able to watch Kirby, just an outstanding play, awesome movement. And he just jumps it, and he almost comes up with the interception. You got Derek Barnes running up the seam with that tight end. I believe it was tight end or receiver. And I just thought everything kind of came together. The disguises, the different coverages. And it doesn't always work, right? We're going to see all 20. It doesn't always work, but I just thought they were on their game defensively, offensive side. Now, speaking of defense, we knew Green Bay had a great defense. And it was coming into the year, a lot of people assumed that this was going to be one of the best defenses in football. And I don't know if they were that for the year, but I do know that they have a fantastic secondary. They do. They play on a string. They have their eyes on the quarterback. It is tough to complete passes against this team, but that's without turning the ball over on this team. It just is. But tie that in with the fact that they can get after you on the front. Like, Denny Clark is an animal, even on run plays. Like, you see it, we have to put 2 guys on him because he is just an absolute animal that just wreaks havoc more often than not. It wasn't the prettiest game by the offense, and again, we'll see that with the all-22, but the creativity was there when we needed to be. The shot play to Khalif, we hit the big plays when we needed to. The creativity was there, the awareness of what they were going to do in certain spots, a big 4th down pickup, another 4th down pickup. Like, when we needed it, we had it. The run game started to kind of break loose a little bit. We contained Kenny Clark, and we just started to move people. Some things out there, whether it was a couple missed throws early, a couple of drops, little things like that. But we just did enough. We did enough, and that was huge. And we also had a missed field goal in this game. To tie it all together, the clock management. And I have to pull this out there because, we go back early in the season, and Minnesota's the first example, and I think there's other examples where I still didn't love the fact that they didn't look at the ones that should have been touchdowns. I still don't love that because the Dallas one now has me thinking about that all the time. But when you look at the clock management towards the end there, for them to jump off sides like they did and Dan Campbell to decline it was outstanding on 2nd and 1. Not just give them the first and reset the downs. That's what they wanted. They were doing that purposely, but you declined it. That was awesome. And then for you to have a holding call and then them have them accept it. May not have mattered, but to me that was like, why would you do that? So I felt like coaching-wise, the time management was really good there. We went for it on 4th down, which is you can almost like say, hey, different scenario, sure. But obviously this one would have went up 7. The other one only went up 6. It just felt like a no-brainer last time we played Minnesota. Like, wait, why are we kicking this field goal? And then in this game, conditions, field goals weren't great. We had already missed one. Crosby missed one. It wasn't going to be a long field goal to go up 7. They had no timeouts, but you just know the situation and how the game goes and how this thing happens. You just said, I'm going to end it right here. And he had a great play call for it. You came out with that, tempo huddle, and you just put it on him. And it was just everything kind of tied together. You hate it, but it does feel like at the same time, too, if you're able to learn from those things that go wrong at the beginning of the year, it can be necessary. If you don't, then it's like, well, dang, that loss was trash because we're still making the same mistakes. But you can say that, I don't want to say exactly, but it did feel like the Lions won in all those areas. And I thought clock management, I thought they managed the game better from a coaching standpoint, which is huge. I want to talk Goff a little bit. I want to talk Jared Goff. Not too much. You guys know my thoughts on Jared Goff. If you don't know, I'm a Goff guy. I believed in him coming into the year. I felt like this guy hadn't hit his ceiling coming into the year. So I thought he was going to be our guy going forward. And I think he had a good season. I'm still on board with that. But Brad Holems, of course, was asked about it. I thought his answer was funny. Okay, currently the Detroit Lions, I'll throw up their draft picks right now. They have the 6th pick, as you can see, and the 18th pick, the 6th pick being from the Rams, which was kind of unexpected, but it's awesome. So then there's going to be, obviously, the quarterback talk that comes in. And that's not to say that they can't take a quarterback. But at the same time, I thought Brad Holmes' answer was pretty great here. We're going to hold up our end. We're going to give you the weapons. You were in a bad spot last year. He said we had a lot of injuries, which we did. And we're going to hold up our end, and he felt like he held up his end. It's a lot easier to get worse at the quarterback position than to get better at the quarterback position. And then, he kind of asked, like, what do you think? And he's clearly like, he's like, Goff is the right guy for us, going forward. Here's what I don't like about the whole idea that it's a trap and things like that. Coaching is super underrated, but it feels like a lot of times people can just choose when they want to make coaching be important. Like in this argument, I want to make coaching sound important, but most of the time it's at every level, I feel like it's extremely underrated. I mean, you think at a college level, right? A lot of players will choose where they go, whether they transfer. It's why the transfer portal is so important right now. It's why hiring a guy like Brian Kelly at LSU is so important, because the transfer portal matters so much. And a lot of times it's that coach that you end up hiring. Like that matters so much at that level. And you can see it by guys transferring, where you commit to. A lot of it has to do with the coach. You commit to a school, coach leaves, that player may leave as well, because it is about the coach, because they know how much that matters. But at the NFL, it doesn't get that attention because the players are the ones on the salary cap. They're the people making the money. They're the face of the team. And that makes sense, right? I understand that, but I also think it's not one of those things that you can pick and choose when you want to make coaching important. It can be that idea of, okay, now we want to choose that coaching is this important, and that if we lose this coach, you can't stick with Jared Goff because Ben Johnson is that great. Like that's kind of the idea now. But I think that's crazy. Right? Obviously, losing Ben Johnson hurt us big time. It definitely would, and I hope he doesn't leave. But obviously, if he gets the opportunity, take that opportunity if you want to be a head coach. You don't know when you're going to get those opportunities. So, yeah, go for it. You've earned that. Ben Johnson is currently set up to have 3 interviews. Probably could have more by the time you're seeing this. And again, if I'm another team and I'm looking for a head coach and I'm going to go the coordinator route, I'm hiring Ben Johnson. I don't know about all of the other coordinators in the NFL, but I've watched all the All-22. His creativity is unmatched when you take a look at from game to game. This last game was a great example, but he brings things like this out all the time. The trick plays. He always feels like he's a step ahead of the defense. When he's missing guys, when he was missing guards and you had KO'd and those guys out there, and he had to try to mitigate the impact of that, but still push the ball like he did against Buffalo. We're missing receivers, and they had to utilize fast motion. Even going back to last year, utilizing motion to give Goff answers pre-snap. The dude is outstanding at all of those kind of things. I think the perfect stat is this team was 4th in red zone percentage offensively. That tells you all you need to know. And a lot of it was passing the ball. There was a stretch where we couldn't punch it in. And we're like, we have to get better rushing the ball in the red zone. We started off really well, then we started to struggle. And passing the football, we just found ways to get dudes open. So he's outstanding, but this is something that good teams have to go through, is that guys get plucked and they go elsewhere, and you have to be able to make it work. And it's not going to be easy. It's not just a given that that's going to happen, because losing a great coordinator is losing a great coordinator, and I believe he's that. But what about Aaron Glenn? I think Aaron Glenn could be a very good coordinator with some more tools, and hopefully he gets those this offseason. I think he will, and then I don't know. He could take off and be the next guy, right? He had talk last season, but that's what good teams have to do, and hopefully maybe that's an in-house option. We have a guy that can plug in and take over, because that's what you're going to need long-term. That's what Dan Campbell has to do. It's one of the most important things for him, is that you're not a coordinator. You're going to have to find a way to replace guys when they leave if we're going to be long-term successful. This is Dan Campbell's job, right? We knew that when we hired him. Like, you're not a coordinator. So one of your jobs is going to be finding those coordinators. This is part of the reason that probably he fired Anthony Lynn halfway through last season. We weren't producing offensively. But there was also a massive part of that again, at the time wasn't brought up because it was a coaching change. It was Taylor Decker returning. That changed so much for this offense. I mean, there were literally plays that Lynn was running when he was here that we weren't pushing the ball downfield. Everything was designed to go underneath because we couldn't pass protect, right? So, yes, Ben Johnson being a little bit more involved in the offense last season was important, but also keep in mind the fact that Dan Campbell was calling plays in the second half of the season, and we saw the big, turnaround that Jared Goff had statistically and how well he played toward the end of last season. Now, this season, when he has a good year, a phenomenal year, we're talking 4,400 passing yards, we're talking 29 touchdowns, 7 picks, all right? He had a fantastic season across the board statistically. Now it's all about the coach and, hey, don't bring this guy back, don't trust it because it's a trap and this and that. Well, hold up, that's Dan Campbell's job. That's just how it is in the NFL. Coaching matters. We all know it matters, and it definitely needs to get more attention than it does. But that's Campbell's job, is going to be to find that next guy, because that's what it is in the NFL. I know a lot of people coming in this year, kind of the idea was, well, Goff needs the best rushing attack of football. That's when he was at his best. He needs this, he needs that. And yeah, that helps him. But let's also keep in mind this season, it wasn't all perfect as much as some people make it out to believe. Like, okay, Lions have a great O-line on paper. They do, right? But was it all here? No. Big V wasn't here at all. Lions have this receiving core that's so much better now. Okay, but was it here the whole time? No, the Lions have this running game. It was awful at one point in the season. Let's think about this for a second. The Lions started the season 1-6. Through that span, they averaged 5 yards a carry, and they were 1-6. Big part during that time was defense. You have a game like Seattle where you don't force the team to punt. Look, if you don't force a team to punt, especially a team that coming into the game, I believe is averaging less than 20 points a game, you're going to lose that football game. That's the first order of, that's a problem. Just like Brad Holmes said after the season, hey, okay, what's the biggest needs? Well, we were ranked 32 defensively, so that's going to have to get, addressed. Yeah, that's the biggest need. We all know that's the biggest need. But we were 1-6 during that time, and we could run the football. However, the Detroit Lions, during this great stretch, you go from the Green Bay Packers game all the way to Carolina. Lions were 6-2 during that span. Guess what? They averaged 3.6 yards per carry. That's 31st. That would be 31st in the league. They couldn't run the football. So I get the idea is like, oh, it's perfect. They could run the football all year. It wasn't. We couldn't run the football. And there was also a massive stretch in there where we didn't have J-Mo. And even though J-Mo didn't become a big part of our offense really at any point this season, DJ Shark was out from week 3 all the way to the New York Giants game. And that's where you have a game like Dallas where that's like the biggest game that holds his numbers down, because towards the end you had a couple of fumbles late. Right? But how many fumbles did he have after that were recovered by the other team? How many interceptions did he have after that? That's one game where you didn't have Shark going into it, right? Your top receivers were extremely limited. You didn't have Josh Reynolds for a point in time during the season. There's a formula, there's a way that Jared Goff can be successful. And now that you've seen that, if anything, it just should make you say, okay, look, whether or not Ben Johnson stays or goes, now we know that that's the formula. If the next guy can't make it work, then he's probably not the right guy, because we know that it can work, and it doesn't have to be all perfect, because it wasn't all perfect. For a lot of the season, it wasn't perfect, and we had to lean on the pass game. We had to throw the ball 40-plus times in some of those games that we won. We won the ball throwing it 40-plus times. Like, we had to do things like that to make it work. Hey, this trade, I get all the optics to it, and we don't know the relationship. It didn't seem to be great, but I think McVay kind of gave it away when he said, Stafford will. He's just kind of like, F it. Like, I'm just going to throw it up there. That's the guy that he wanted. I'm cool with that. That's the kind of player that he wanted. I understand. He didn't draft Jared Goff. Maybe there's a type of quarterback that he liked better, and that was Stafford, and great. But there's a formula as to this type of quarterback can work, and it did work this season. If you're cool with that type of quarterback, which Dan Campbell said, that's the quarterback for us. If you're cool with that style of quarterback, it's already been proven now this season that it can work. To think that you're one of the worst rushing teams in football and you start to win all of a sudden, like, what's going on there? Well, maybe because your defense wasn't giving up so many points. It was still bad, but it wasn't that bad. So we know where the issue is, but I just think that idea is crazy. Off in the last 10 games, again, we're talking about this poor rushing attack. He completed 66% of his passes, 253 passing yards a game, 17 touchdowns to 1 interception. That was Green Bay. He went like 8 straight weeks without an interception, a 104 passer rating. That's the numbers that he put up in the last 10 games, and for a majority of that, we could not run the football at all. The contract, I think one thing, we're going to speak numbers real quick that I think is great, and we'll talk about this more than the offseason, is his contract setup. We have 2 more years currently under his deal, all right? And based on, where his cap hit's going to fall, $30.6 million this next year, the year after, this upcoming season, year after $31.65 million. We'll see where the cap number actually hits as a whole for the league. But what's great about that is when you look at the quarterbacks that he's actually ahead of in terms of cap hit, For this next coming year, it's a few quarterbacks that really have their contract laid out where it's really cheap in the front, and then in the back it goes crazy like Russell Wilson. Or you take a look at 2024 when really he's only in front of one quarterback that's legitimately getting paid. After that, it's basically all the young guys, and of course guys are going to get paid, so he's going to drop down big time, okay? He's 11th and 10th currently, and that won't last. Of course, we know that's going to drop big time. So the price point isn't even that big of an issue, considering the fact that on top of that, you also have the situation where he doesn't really have much dead cap now, right? This was the out, right? That was always talked before. Well, this is an out. Well, it still is technically an out, which is not going to happen now. But what's big positive of that is that his base salary is pretty massive. 20 of the 30 million that is his cap hit for this upcoming season is base salary. Same thing for the year after that. So yeah, if you want to also lower that cap number, that's a possibility. You could definitely do that. If you're going to rock with him and you're like, hey, we needed some extra money, just like you did, the first year you got him, you could definitely look at it and say, well, let's just take some of that base, convert it to a bonus, and then we'll open up some cap space. You also have that flexibility now because not all of it's guaranteed at this point. You have money that's just base salary that you can maneuver. We know the cap is always maneuverable usually until you get yourself in a spot where it's not, because you guarantee everything. That's not all guaranteed right now. So you can maneuver a lot of that base salary that he currently has. So there's also flexibility within his contract to open up more cap space if you want to. Even in saying that the Lions have cap space, you see the draft picks that they have. And speaking the draft picks for a second, when you look at this, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, I think one thing's also interesting, and DoseOfDion brought this up, and I looked at it, and I don't think the numbers really play out here, but I do think it's interesting that trade is also not something that's should be forgotten. Okay, draft picks, all those things. Not saying it'll happen, but keep in mind what LA did in the second year with the Rams. Not to say that Brad did this, but he was a part of it. 2018, when they went out and traded for the Aqib Talib, DeMarcus Peters, when he went out and made these trades, they traded away Alec Ogletree, they traded away guys, they brought in guys. That's also not off the table. Remember, they traded for Jalen Ramsey, but because of the 2 firsts and 2 seconds, there is a possibility where if a certain guy came available, you could make a trade. It doesn't even have to be that big, right? Aqib Talib was a 6th-round pick, I believe, and he was a huge part of that team. They moved Peters after a year. They gave up a 2nd, 4th, and all they got back was Peters and a 6th. They moved him after a year. It didn't work out. But Aqib Talib did, and they only gave up a 6th-round pick for him, an older corner that was going to help him immediately. So things like that aren't off the table. That's why I go back to Stephon Gilmore, because of his cap hit. He's got 1 year left on his deal. He's looking at this saying, hey, Lions just won on Sunday Night Football like every other free agent will be, even though he's not a free agent. But what if it took a 6th-round pick to throw to Stephon Gilmore? I mean, remember, that's what it took for the Panthers to acquire him. Of course, he went on to go sign with the Colts. So a guy like that, I'm not saying him, it has to be, but I'm saying that's also possible. It's possible that a trade does occur with the capital that you also have. They don't all have to be draft picks, and he didn't go into specifics, but we know we need defense. But I do think one thing that was important about what he said about getting defense, he did point out certain guys. He pointed out Malcolm Rodriguez and that linebacker core with Derek Barnes and his improvement. Duracell, what he did, even though he's an upcoming free agent. By the way, let's take a look. Here's the upcoming free agents. Not every upcoming free agent, but it's like the main upcoming free agents that the Lions have for the season. You can see Duracell on their top of the list, 29. I think he's going to get re-signed. He was on a 1-year deal. He'll probably get that again. Okay, now, hey, he just had 100 tackles, so maybe not. And if he's gone, then he may have to adjust some things. I think he'll probably get re-signed. But with Derek Barnes, Malcolm Rodriguez, in his eyes, he felt like it kind of became a strength of this team. So we always talk about linebacker. I never really thought they would dress heavy at linebacker. I just don't think it's the philosophy, and they may continue to not do that. I don't know. Monty, it doesn't seem like he'll probably be brought back, but Will Harris, right, that's a guy I'm bringing back. Deshaun Elliott, I'm bringing back. You have a guy, Jamal Williams. We know him and what he means. Evan Brown, at 27 years old. I think it would be great to bring him back. I don't know where his price point goes. It was very cheap last offseason. If his price point's much more expensive this year, which is very possible because of how much he played, maybe not. And if that's the case, either way, you're going to have to address guard because of Big V, whether or not he's going to be here, or you're going to move that or adjust his contract, go elsewhere. Guard is a big thing the Lions will have to worry about, but I think Evan Brown definitely in line to get re-signed as long as it's not super expensive because you need depth. Speak to that. If there's anything that we learned from this season about Jared Goff, is that, well, what's the formula for it to work? Coaching is a formula for that, but that's literally every player. I mean, let's remember here, you can go down the board. It doesn't just have to be Goff. We drafted Kyle Van Noy. He did nothing here. And then he goes to Patriots, and it's like, well, this guy's really good. Like, that's just how it works. He got paid elsewhere because you have to be able to coach the player that you draft. That's the case everywhere. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit, right? Maybe Goff just didn't fit with Sean McVay. Isn't that a possibility? I mean, I think it is. Everybody thought that McVay made Goff what he was, and I just saw Jared Goff put up, in my opinion, his best season of his career without having a run game for a majority of the time, with a first-time offensive coordinator in Ben Johnson who, we didn't really know anything about. See, my opinion has definitely changed big time on this. if you are a good coach and you're going to stick around with that team, you should be able to take that player with his skill set and make it work. And we saw this year, Ben Johnson made it work. Whether that's Mike McDaniel making it work with Tua or Brian Dable making it work with Daniel Jones. Heck, they're talking about re-signing him. Talk about, how hard it is to get a quarterback. They're talking about re-signing that guy, right? I would say Goff had a better season than both of them. But that's just the case. And if the guy can't make that work, then at that point, you don't have an NFL coach because now it's been proven that it can work. He just had his best season of his career. So maybe the formula, if we take away from this, is the biggest thing. Pass protect. Pass protect. Because if you pass protect, he doesn't need the best weapons because we didn't always have the best weapons and we were still productive. If you pass protect, you give him an opportunity to hold on to the football and get through progressions. We're pretty efficient offensively, and he doesn't turn the ball over. That's the biggest thing that you take away. So if there's anything that you're going to address offensively, it's probably that. I mean, I would love to have the Todd Gurley and a guy that can average, best in the league, and he's ridiculous. That would be awesome. It would help us a ton. But we didn't do that for majority of the time. We were still efficient offensively. We were still very effective offensively. We found ways to do that. To this free agent class, John Kaminsky, 28 years old, right? John Kaminsky, I look at him and say he has to come back. I think there's going to be a lot of intrigue in the Lions, right? I think there will be, and it was great for that. John Kaminsky put this out after the season, talking about wanting to be back, wanted to be brought back to the Lions. Now, he did talk about, his snaps that he got and the opportunity, and that'll be something the Lions have to decide on because, of course, you would think his opportunity would probably go back a little bit next season, with the return of Charles and Romeo and the Josh Pascals. However, the Lions say they're going to play the best player. He got his opportunity, and he balled out this past year. I mean, and on top of that, I would expect his contract numbers are going to go through the roof, I would think. But just the fact that he says, I want to be a Lion, like that kind of tells you all you have to know. And Lions gave him that opportunity because they felt like he was the best player, and the dude was awesome. All over the place. He has crazy size. He is our second, leading pressure guy this season. Like, the dude was outstanding, and he missed a lot of time. Numbers that go on is Chris Board, right? Talking about, playing the Packers well. He had a fantastic play on Lazard from the slot, manned up, where it literally led to a sack. Because Chris Board covered up Lazard in the slot, he didn't have anywhere to throw the ball. You're looking at that thinking matchup. Nope, it was taken away. So he took a sack. Benito Jones, right? I mean, Isaiah Buggs, guys like that. Hey, those guys need to come back, right? Shane Zylstra, Nate Sudfeld, backup quarterback. So just a quick look at that. But free agency-wise, I think it's one of those things where you're going to have flexibility. You're going to be able to open up cap, whether that's with Michael Brockers, so I don't think we'll be here. There's guys that you'll probably move on from to open up cap. Big V, we'll see with that one. Goff has always flexibility within his contract, and still you have good cap regardless of even doing that. The idea that DoseOfDion did bring up to me was Jalen Ramsey. Now, what's not crazy is the idea that he could get traded. I mean, it's probably the Rams' most valuable asset, considering where he's at in age. He's about to get to that 29, 30-year-old kind of age. Also, his cap number is about to take off. So when you look at that, considering that's probably their most valuable asset, the Rams looking to trade it away, possibly try to get some help on that offensive line, that's not crazy. Also, considering that it looks like Sean McVay is not going to be their coach this season. I don't know that for sure, but there has been reports put out there that Sean McVay has kind of, given his assistant coaches to, go look for other jobs. Not like, hey, leave, but, hey, go explore other options that are out there as well. So that wouldn't be shocking if Ramsey was potentially traded, but when you look at the cap number, I really struggle with it. I mean, you're getting one of the best cornerbacks in football, and that would immediately fix a lot. Going the numbers out for a second, if they said, hey, you got to give us our pick back, that Rams first-round pick back, because we want to go get, say, Sean Payton, and from the Saints is going to take draft compensation, it's intriguing, right? Maybe you give him that 18th pick back, but only just his age, that maybe isn't the biggest concern to me, but also that cap number, how big it is, I would really struggle to see Brad Holmes doing that unless the Rams took on a big part of that money. But that was the idea, but it made me think and remember about all the trade possibilities, of course, in the draft, but even outside of the draft. And then the final point that I want to hit on is Sheila Hamp, man. I mean, they had her in, the locker room celebration, but I know I've touched on this, and I just want to make it clear that I do believe that all of this excitement and everything going forward does come back and start with her, and I credit her for this, right? We were 1-6 this season. She backed those guys and said, hey, I'm confident in them. They're going to turn this thing around. Dan said he didn't need that, but for the media, because she said that. She stuck up for her guys, and we've seen in the past when halfway through the season things aren't looking right, we start firing people, right? This is year 2. Okay, we're going to start firing guys. That's happened before. Literally almost the exact same timeline it happened with Jim Caldwell. He had a good first season in 2014, 2015. We were off to a 1-7 start, and we started firing everybody but Jim Caldwell. And I always say it's a big reason I believe Jim Caldwell was fired, because then once you fire the GM and you had the head coach there, you hire the next GM who you didn't really search for. They kind of just said, hey, go get this guy. Then all of a sudden he wanted to get his guy, which was ultimately Patricia, and that all kind of happened. However, Sheila did something different for this approach. The first time that I've seen that I can remember is she went out and said, I'm going to find both of these guys. These are going to be my guys. I'm going to hire them separately, right? So it's not GM hires the head coach. I'm hiring them separately. She found both the guys. I think Dan Campbell was technically hired first, but she went out and searched and looked for them. She didn't ask someone for, hey, which guy should I go hire, right? She went out there and said, okay, I'm going to go find the guy. I'm going to go interview tons of people, and I'm going to go find the guys that I believe in. And what that does, I believe, is in a situation like that, you're going to back them because you believe in those people. You know, it's like that draft guy that you really like coming out. You believe in that guy. Even when no one else does, halfway through the season, you're like, man, he don't look that good. Trust me, I believe in that guy. He's going to be all right. That's what it is with her guys, and even to a more extent because she's working with them. She believes in them, so she has their back. She's not going to be quick to, pull that trigger, but she's all in with them. And I think that starts everything because now you don't have that spiral effect, and now everything is working much better together that she went out and found those people. So I give her, honestly, the majority of all this credit. Because we've always said, it starts with the owner. The ownership doesn't change. Well, it did change. And it changed to Sheila Hamp. She became the owner. And she said, I'm going to go find the next GM and head coach. And credit to her. And I think she deserves a lot of the credit because I know they've got a lot of hate historically. She deserves a lot of the credit for where this is at because of that decision that she made to go out and find those guys. And if you believe in Brad and Dan, you should believe in the decision that she made because she stuck with them, and I credit her for that because they were her guys, I believe. So I think that has to be brought up. Shout out to her taking that approach. We know she's super competitive, but saying, I'm going to go find the people to turn this thing around because, again, if it's your business and you really care about it and you want to fix that thing, you don't go ask someone else, hey, who should I hire? Like, you got one job. Hire the right GM and head coach. Or maybe just the GM and he could hire the head coach. Hire the right person to do the job. Because if you don't do that, then you're not really doing any part of that job on terms of the football side. You don't need to make the football moves, okay? You need to hire those right people, and I think she's nailed it. So I give her all the credit. And give you guys the credit. Appreciate you guys sticking with us through the season. If you watched every regular season game that we live streamed, I think we live streamed 13 or 14 of them this season. Season goes way too darn fast, but man, it was a fun one. And I'm excited for the offseason because the offseason is always fun. I mean, the draft is amazing. It's always fun, but I do love the season, and I'm glad it ended like it did, that we had a really fun stretch, and hopefully you just embraced it and enjoyed it, and if anything, hopefully you have some excitement. I know there's a lot of people that have excitement now that maybe they didn't have coming into the year, but for the future years because of how the Lions finished this thing off, and you definitely should. Some credit to the linebackers and, some of these guys that he feels like are, pieces to grow for the future. Obviously the draft picks, and he even brought up, he thinks the pass rush is on his way. We didn't have Romeo for a lot of time of the season, which I more and more think that he's going to be here next year. He just didn't play much. I mean, I don't have the exact snap counts from his last game, but I was doing the All-22. I was like, I just didn't see him much on the field. So hopefully a full offseason helps him. The thing was Jamo. Jamo just needs time. He just needs time. I mean, there's so much, technical things that goes into what these receivers do, timing of these routes, the adjustments on the fly. He needs just to get reps and return from this injury. He just needs time. I mean, that's where it's at, and it's fine. He's going to get there and be ridiculous when he is, probably next season, but he just needed time this year. But Romeo, getting back and healthy is the biggest thing for him because we know he can produce, and they paid the guy, so I don't assume he's going anywhere. Charles Harris, he was on IR. He's still under contract. He's another guy that there's maybe something that goes on there because his cap hit jumps up to $8 million, but if he's brought back, right, he's another guy that didn't really do much this season. So like he said, there's not a lot of, there's front seven looks pretty good actually, and I think we need another DT, and then the majority of it to me is addressing that cornerback position. But my thoughts on kind of what Brad Holmes hit on, I didn't hit on everything there. We'll probably revisit this. We're definitely going to go through and probably take a look at each positional group. Where do we feel like we really need things? How much of it is a need? I mean, we're saying needs now, but what's really the needs and how pressing is that need, and will the Lions probably address by position? I mean, that's something I want to do again this offseason. I think we started it last year. We didn't really go through it. It was also kind of late, but I want to go through that this year for sure before we get into the draft and free agency. But I think if anything, everybody saw this. It meant a lot for us. And I think the Sheila Hamp and Dan Campbell could put it best. The division will run through Detroit, okay? As Brad was asked, playoffs, I mean, that's kind of like the expectation now, right? He felt like we could have hung with those guys this year. That's kind of the expectation now, is that's where we're at. Where we're at as a team. Because of what you did this year, great. That's the expectation, and you expect that it's going to continue to just get better and better. So with that, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Prop, for watching, and I'm out.